The type of brush that you use is so much more important to your healthy hair journey than most people realize, because brushing weakens our hair, causes cuticle damage, and causes breakage. Which is exactly why I tested out 16 of the highest rated, most raved about hairbrushes to find the ones that are the least likely to do those things. But before I dive into details on each individual brush, let's talk about the things that are important to consider when selecting a brush that is the least likely to cause damage and breakage. There are two main things that cause damage and breakage while we are brushing our hair. The first thing is the force that we apply to our hair while brushing through it, which is often referred to as combing forces in scientific literature. And the second thing is the occurrence of tangles, both around other hair strands while brushing and around the brush bristles themselves. So that means that in order to find a brush that is the least likely to cause damage and breakage, we need to find a brush that, number one, applies the least amount of combing force possible, and number two, is the least likely to cause complex tangles or to catch on tangles that already exist. One of the main characteristics of a brush that can help to minimize both of those things is more space between bristles. More space between bristles leads to fewer and less complex tangles, which leads to less combing forces as a result, in addition to less abrasion and less breakage. Another very important consideration is the material and stiffness of the brush bristles. Because the harder and stiffer that brush bristles are, the more abrasive and rough they are on our hair, which in turn leads to more damage and breakage. A perfect example of the worst offender of this is metal. Metal is obviously a material that is very firm, unflexible, stiff, hard, whatever you want to call it. So that would be something that is too rough and abrasive for our hair. The exact opposite of a metal bristle brush would probably be a boar bristle brush. Boar bristles are known for being incredibly soft and gentle, but the trade-off for that is that they're not as good at detangling as brushes that have stiffer bristles. So the goal would be to find some sort of happy medium that brushes through tangles enough while being as soft and gentle as possible. And that is where nylon bristles come into the conversation. According to Google AI, very scientific I know, nylon is a synthetic plastic material that is a type of organic thermoplastic known as a polyamide nylon. So in other words, nylon is a form of plastic, but not all plastic bristles are equal. You will definitely see that as we start to talk through these brushes. Some of them are harder and stiffer and more abrasive, whereas others are softer and gentler and more flexible. The second to last consideration is whether or not the bristles are ball tipped, which just means that they have that little round ball at the top of the bristle. I love how, like, was that supposed to be a ball? What is this? The reason why these kinds of bristles can be problematic is because your hair can catch on them more easily, which makes it more likely to break, especially if you are using a brush like that and brushing through your hair kind of quickly and roughly. That makes that more likely to happen with brushes that have ball-tipped bristles. But on the flip side, if you are brushing very slowly and gently, you can also kind of use those balls as a guide to see where your brush is catching and where you need to detangle with your fingers first before going through that with your brush. I say that because I used to do that exact thing when I was going through my severe bleach damage journey. I was using a brush that had ball-tipped bristles, and I was using that as a guide to see, okay, where do I need to actually put my brush down and remove the tangles with my fingers first before continuing on the journey so that I am the least likely to cause breakage possible. But I also recognize the fact that that is a lot more time consuming and just requires more patience and I was gonna say tediousness. I don't know if that's the word I want to use. I recognize the fact that that is not going to be everybody's journey, and for a lot of people, it's just going to be a safer bet to use a brush that has no ball-tipped ends. But the last thing to consider with the ball-tipped bristles is that they are often a gentler option for those that have really sensitive scalps. That ball is meant to kind of act as like a protective cover over an otherwise sharp bristle, and you will see as we talk through some of these brushes that some of them are really sharp and pokey and uncomfortable, and if you have a really sensitive scalp, if you have a scalp condition, then that might be a deal breaker. And the last consideration is whether or not your brush has a cushion. If you have no idea what I'm referring to, I will just show you as a quick example. So here's a Tangle Teezer with no cushion base, and here's a Wet Brush Pro which does have a cushion base. This is a consideration that I haven't found any scientific literature on. To my knowledge, I don't think there's any sort of study that would confirm or deny this, but basically the idea for those that are pro cushion based brushes is that this is supposed to be a gentler option because it gives the bristles more flexibility as you're brushing through your hair versus something that has no cushion at all is obviously just gonna stay firm. And the reason why I bring that up is because I feel like there might be some truth to that. all of my least favorite brushes, the brushes I found to be the most rough on my hair, cause the most breakage, are the brushes that do not have a cushion base. However, those brushes also have some issues with the actual bristles that are obviously part of the problem, so it could be a total coincidence, but maybe not. There could be something to that. Now that we know everything that is important to consider when selecting a hairbrush, let's talk through my experience in using all of these brushes, my thoughts, my review, which ones I would recommend and which ones I would not. I don't necessarily have distinct tiers for this video in the way that I maybe do for other showdowns, which is why I'm not really calling this a showdown, or maybe I will. But I do definitely have a distinct bottom tier. I can clearly separate the brushes that I enjoyed the least because, like I just said, these are the brushes that broke my hair the most. And the worst offender of said bottom tier is the Tangle Teezer Ultimate Styler. This retails for $16.99 and is claimed to have patented two-tiered teeth that have a unique bottle shape. There are two different lengths of the bottle shaped teeth, so they have longer teeth that are meant to deliver precision for capturing every hair while styling, and then shorter teeth which are meant to smooth the cuticle for high shine. I don't know about that. So these brush bristles are actually pretty tightly packed. I'll show you next to the Wet Brush Pro so you can see the difference. This one is significantly more spaced out than this right here. In the defense of the Tangle Teezer, the Wet Brush Pro is one of the more spaced out options, so I'll show you one that's kind of like middle ground. In an attempt not to completely disgust you guys, I'm gonna clean off some of these brushes as I go. I'm going to be using this brush cleaner I found on Amazon. It's so cheap and so handy for cleaning brushes. I genuinely don't know how I live without this. It gets all the fuzzies and gunk out. Okay, so here's the Tangle Teezer next to another brush that's not as widely spaced as the Wet Brush Pro, but still is more so than the Tangle Teezer. And I do think that that is part of the problem with this brush, amongst many. The other biggest issue is the material of the brushes and the way that that is designed. Because while they are incredibly bendy at the top, that bendiness and flexibility stops at the very tip. And you can see here, well, hopefully you can see, this might be hard to show you up close. There, you can see the base of the bristle, like from about halfway down, does not budge. It's very firm and very stiff. Like if I tried to bend this over, I would snap it off. And let me show you again, another brushes comparison. Look at how much I can bend these bristles. And because there are no boar bristles mixed into this, like there are for so many other brushes, that just means that this is all you get. There's nothing added to make the brushing experience softer or gentler. And that is something that I definitely felt this brush needed. It was the roughest on my hair. It pulled the most hair out. It broke the most hair strands. It honestly kind of hurt. It really is just too rough. And that makes me wonder how that would change at all if this did have a cushion base, because again, this does not have a cushion. It's completely firm and stiff, so there's no flexibility in the base. And then when you combine that with a lack of flexibility in the bottom of the bristles, well, you don't get a very flexible brushing experience, I'll tell you that. So I personally would not recommend this brush unless you are somebody that has very coarse Something stuck in my throat. Unless you are someone that has very coarse, resistant hair, you don't have damage, you're not worried about that, your hair is not fragile whatsoever, then by all means go for it. You may really love this brush. Know that I am coming at this video, I don't like the way I said that. Know that I am approaching this video as somebody who has fine hair, which means that my hair is very fragile. No matter what I do, what products I use, what my routine looks like, I am always going to have some level of breakage just due to the fact that my individual hair strands are so fine, and as a result of that, so fragile, they snap very easily. Like I'm always gonna have that issue. So I am looking for the brushes that are the least likely to do that. So again, if you don't have fine, fragile hair, then you can do whatever you want. You can always do whatever you want. But my hopes in creating this video was to find the brushes that are going to be the gentlest on your hair for those that are looking to minimize damage. So with that being said, last place. Oh man, I'm about to offend a lot of people. Second to last for me is the FHI Heat Unbrush. This retails for $18 and has trademarked Duo Flex anti-static bristles that allegedly work like magic. This has 58 long bristles for detangling and 47 mini bristles for smoothing and polishing, and it's supposed to be a gentle tangle release that offers reduced breakage. They call the back of this a vented cushion, and while it's definitely curved and like has some movement. It's not the same kind of cushion that you see in these other brushes that's soft and really squishy. Like, this is still a hard plastic. But I don't even really think that that is the biggest issue with this brush. The issue I have with this are the bristles themselves. The bristles are significantly more flexible than the Tangle Teezer, I will give them that. But the material of these bristles is very rough and hard, especially compared to a lot of these other brushes. I keep holding this one up, but good example, like these are so much softer and gentler than these hard plasticky ones. However, they are very widely spaced. This is actually the brush that has the most widely spaced bristles. So I think that helps to offset the roughness of the actual bristle material. If this had gentler bristles with that wider bristle distribution, this would be amazing. But I don't think this is amazing. Obviously, it's getting second to last place. If you are someone that doesn't have tangly hair to begin with, I could imagine you really enjoying this brush and not having any issues. I know that that's why this has gone so viral, but I first tested this out when I did have severe bleach damage. And if you do not know this about bleach, it makes your hair insanely tangly. So if you always have really snarly hair and you're not sure why, and you get your hair bleached, well, that's why. Which meant that every time I wash my hair, I would get out of the shower and it would basically be matted together like a giant tangle. It would just get so insanely tangled that I really had to be careful with what I was using to brush through my hair. And like, not to be dramatic, but this ripped my hair out. I remember using this because at the time, this was like years ago, so it wasn't super viral, but I was starting to hear some things about it and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try it. Sounds great. I had chills. This just ripped so many hairs out of my head because it caught on my tangles, and then the rougher material meant that it wasn't very forgiving and pulled my hair out instead of kind of like bending and then not even letting me fully brush through that. Does that make sense? So again, this is just a brush that I think is too rough for fragile, damaged hair. I wouldn't recommend it if those things are true for you. There are so many other brushes in this video that are far gentler and far less likely to cause breakage. Next in line is the Tangle Teezer Ultimate Detangler. This retails for $15.99 and also has patented 2-tiered teeth technology. So here's the Ultimate Detangler, here's the Ultimate Styler. The Ultimate Detangler bristles appear to be a little bit more widely spaced than the Styler, not by a ton, but a little. The thing that I think makes the biggest difference between these two is that these bristles are definitely bendier and more flexible than the Styler. Like, there's a clear difference. You can even see in like how much I can squish these down. Here, I'll go like this. Check it. However, I still have the same issue with these where they bend a lot at the top, but not at all at the base. So I think that combined with the lack of boar bristles and potentially the cushionless handle just again makes for a rougher brushing experience. It is significantly better for me than the Ultimate Styler. But when I compare how much hair breaks off while I brush when I'm using this versus my favorite brushes in this video, there is a noticeable difference for me, which is why this is in my bottom tier. I do want to quickly address the original Tangle Teezer. I'm sure I'll get questions on this if I don't. So the reason why I didn't include this in the official lineup is because it's not a brush with a handle. It's something that you have to like grasp in the palm of your hand. And because of that, I just find it a lot more difficult to use. Like, I just feel like I can't get at all of my hair in the way that I want to. And I know that that's just my own personal opinion. That's not going to be the truth for everybody. I know that a lot of people find this plenty easy to use and really enjoy it. So if that is the case, I would say out of all of these brushes I just reviewed, this one is definitely the most gentle. These bristles are even gentler and even bendier than this detangler right here. I'll show you, let's do another like stack. And like here you can see they just bend over far more than the other two Tangle Teezers. So if you are interested in a brush that is set up like this in terms of the bristles, you don't want the boar bristles, then I think that this is the gentlest option. However, then you obviously have the trade-off of having to hold it like this and not having a handle. So the choice is up to you. I think that all the rest of these brushes are just better, but wanted to address. The last brush in my bottom tier is the Wet Brush Original Detangler. This retails for $8.99 and has exclusive ultra soft IntelliFlex bristles. It claims to glide through tangles with ease, offer less breakage, damage, pain. This is a brush that does have a cushion for a base, but it has ball tipped bristles, which for a lot of people might be a problem. I like how widely spaced the bristles are, and I like the fact that the bristles are super flexible, but it still doesn't have any boar bristles, which I think is why this pulls on my hair so much more than the brushes that do. While I think this is a significantly better option than the Tangle Teezer Ultimate Styler, I still think it's just a bit too rough when there are so many other gentler options. The rest of the brushes in this video all have a combination of boar bristles and nylon pins. And almost all of them, except for the two that I'll talk about now, do not have ball-tipped ends. So I am going to separate them because of that. These definitely were more likely to catch on my hair than the brushes that don't have ball-tipped ends. Again, you may need a brush with ball-tipped ends if you have really sensitive scalp, or if you want to use that as a guide, but recognizing the fact that that whole process of being like so insanely meticulous and tedious with brushing is not going to be for everybody. I'll just separate these and then we will move on to the rest. So my least favorite of the two is the Olivia Garden Ceramic and Ion Supreme Brush. This retails for $32.25 and says it has Boar Supreme bristles for comfortable soft cushion. They refer to the nylon pins as Styler 7 row bristles, whatever that means. And they say that they are anti-static, ion charged, and have ballpoint tips. That's what they say. The nylon pins are incredibly flexible. They're a thin, kind of like soft, bendy material, and the ball at the end of these bristles is pretty small, so your hair is going to be less likely to like catch and snag on that than a really large ball. Not that any of these have really large balls, but compared to Wet Brush Pro, the Wet Brush Pro definitely has larger balls at the end. However, as you can see here, the Olivia Garden brush is definitely more tightly packed. The bristles are closer together, and I think that is why my hair ended up catching on this more. I just noticed that when brushing through, this was continuing to break/pull more of my hair than this one was, and than any of the others that we'll talk about after. I do have a way better experience with this than the Ultimate Styler or the Unbrush, so I do want to acknowledge that. I don't think it's a bad brush. If your hair's somewhere like in between, not super fragile and damaged, this was one that was enticing to you, I don't think that you'll be disappointed. I think it's a good brush. It's just that for my hair type, I think that there were better options for me that were a bit safer in terms of the breakage, which includes the Wet Brush Pro. So again, out of the two that have ball tipped ends, this one is my favorite. This is actually the brush that I was using when my hair was severely bleach damaged. Did I already say that? This was the brush I used because at that time, I just didn't know that all of these other brushes existed. I was kind of just like looking at Target and seeing what my options were there. And out of everything there, this was my favorite by far. So this is the Wet Brush Pro Shine Enhancer. It retails for $10.99 and has natural boar bristles with the exclusive ultra soft IntelliFlex bristles. These bristles are very flexible, but I will say compared to the original Detangler, I feel like these are just like a little bit softer. I don't know, something about this material is a little rougher, even though it says it's the same kind of bristle. I also noticed that the Wet Brush Pro doesn't have as many boar bristles as a lot of these other brushes, but in saying that, this is $10.99 and some of these other brushes are more than $100. One is more than 200. So that is something that totally makes sense to me. So again, I think compared to Olivia Garden, the reason why I see less breakage with this is just because the bristles are more widely spaced. This is still a brush that I recommend when people ask for an affordable option that they can just pick up at the drugstore, because I loved this while I was using it. I felt like it made such a difference compared to other things like the Unbrush or a wide tooth comb. Like those kinds of things just ripped through my hair. So this was like a breath of fresh air for me at the time. But again, I did not know about all these other brushes. I didn't test anything out, so I can't speak to what my experience was in using other things during that period of my hair journey. I wish that I could. But now in testing all of these brushes, I do think that there are even better options than this. So let's dive into those. So the rest of the brushes that we have here, I do still have a lot, Godspeed, again, are all brushes that have a combination of boar bristles and nylon pins, but now we have entered into the territory of the brushes that do not have ball tipped ends. And I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys. I, at first, was trying to create a rank order, like this is the least gentle to the most gentle, but I just don't feel I can do that. I don't think that there is enough of a difference between these brushes to make a major difference in the health of your hair, in your hair journey, in the amount of hair that breaks off. I think between all of them, the differences are so minor. I am still going to talk through all of these brushes and point out some of those minor variations because some are a little bit gentler, while as others do detangle a little bit better. But ultimately, the biggest difference that I notice in some of these that kind of like separates a few of them from the rest is quality and price point. And for the most part, those lower price point options definitely are lower quality. Like the quality is reflected in the price. You'll be able to see for some of them, the bristles look significantly more frayed. They just kind of like wear a lot more than some of the higher price point options, which have held up so much better and just have better quality. But that doesn't mean I'm saying these low price point options are bad. I will share which ones I think are better than others, but I want to acknowledge the fact that not everybody can/wants to spend a lot of money on a brush. That is not something that's a requirement for healthy hair. I never want anyone watching my videos to feel like they can't participate and can't get the results I'm talking about because they can't afford it. No, not allowed here. So no matter what your budget is, I have an option for you here that is this exact kind of brush I've been talking about with, you know, this kind of setup that is, ew, hair fluffs everywhere. That is going to be a gentler, safer option than all of the other brushes we just talked about that I would recommend over those. Again, it's just going to come down to the level of quality that you want and what you want to spend. I would be remiss to not first talk about this brush right here because this brush is actually how this video even came to be in the first place, because originally I set out to find a dupe for the Mason Pearson brush. And I say the Mason Pearson brush because this is supposed to be like the best brush of all time. Ask any hairstylist what the most elite hairbrush is. Chances are most of them are going to at least mention Mason Pearson. But the big issue with this brush is that it's $275. Insanity. And if I am being totally honest, I don't think that the quality right here, like of the handle, of the base, reflects that price at all. Like nothing about this feels luxe to me, and it is by far the most expensive brush in this video. The next highest price point for these brushes, like that comes close, is $100. And that's the Oribe resin brush right here. And that brush feels significantly more luxe and elevated than this one for $175 less. So I hate that about the Mason Pearson. However, the reason why I bought this in the first place is because my stylist showed me hers. She had been using it on all of her clients for the past however many years, a long, long time, and it was still in great shape. So when it comes to the quality of this brush, I think it's really just reflected in the bristles and not the rest of it. That is something I continue to hear from people who had decided to invest in this at one point, that it lasts them years and years and years. Like I'm talking 20 plus years. So the reason why this brush is so hyped up and supposed to be like magic for your hair is because of all of the reasons we just talked about. It has the Boar bristles, it has the nylon pins, it's nicely spaced, could be more widely spaced, but the pins are super, super flexible. Something that I really love about this brush is that the tip end of the pins are actually slightly rounded, like they're tapered, so they're not just flat across. Some of these brushes do have that problem, and I say problem because it makes it uncomfortable. It makes it kind of like sharp and pokey while you're brushing, and that's gonna be an issue if you have a sensitive scalp, or maybe you just don't wanna feel like you're poking your scalp every time you brush. That's fair too, neither do I. Ew, I haven't cleaned this one in a while. I'm gonna have to like really get in here after this video. The fuzzies. So I bought this a few years ago when my stylist showed me her brush and how well it had held up. I was wowed, and when I first tried it, I was even more wowed because I had not tried a brush quite like this that didn't have the ball tipped ends. I had obviously tried Wet Brush Pro, but this definitely felt like a step up. I was like, okay, I'm understanding the hype. I have less breakage. It's gentler on my hair. That felt like a huge game changer for me because at that point, I did not know that there were all of these other brushes. And so I was like, oh my God, the fact that we can use something like this that's going to break our hair less when often brushing is what breaks our hair the most. So do I love this brush? Yes. Do I think it's great? Yes. Do I think that you need to buy it at $275 knowing that there are other options that are much more affordable? No. If this is something that you view as an investment, I totally get it because that was my mindset at the time. I think now I'm like, well, maybe I'd like to invest for $175 less. But regardless, if this is something you want to invest in, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It really is an incredible brush. But we have a lot of other good options now. And again, That's kind of how this video came to be in the first place. I was like, let's find a dupe because this is absurd. Let's start off with a quick mention of two that I just wouldn't recommend. Despite having the same kind of setup, the same kind of bristles, I just don't think that the quality is there compared to others at the same price with the same kind of setup. So the first is something I found on Amazon just in looking for dupes. This is the Misel brush, and I'm sure you can kind of tell, like, these bristles are so frayed, it's not holding up. This is the type of thing you would need to repurchase relatively quickly. And the bristles on this are honestly just like too bendy, so you don't get that detangling effect that you get with Mason Pearson. The other is the Shash brush, right? Shash, yeah. I don't think this is bad. I just don't think that you will love it if you are looking for something that gives you the exact same kind of results as Mason Pearson, because again, like, they're just a bit too bendy. I'm not getting the same detangling benefit. And I also don't think the quality is as good with this one either. You know, the quality of this one is honestly kind of comparable to those. This is the Ion, what are you? Professional Boar and Nylon Cushion Brush. It's $10.99, but I do think that compared to those other two, you get a closer brushing experience to the Mason Pearson with this one, even though you can tell that the bristles are definitely fraying already. The bristles are super flexible and would feel softer if it were not for the way that they just cut off at the top. This is what I was talking about compared to the Mason Pearson. This is just flat, it's sharp, it feels very pokey and uncomfortable while I'm using it. So while I'm not obsessed with this one, I think for $10.99, if you are looking for something that is, you know, comparable-ish to Mason Pearson, this would be the one to go for over some of the others. Next is the Denman D81M Style and Shine Brush. This is a little bit more pricey at $29.95, but still much more reasonable than a lot of the others. These bristles are so bendy that I feel like I don't get quite as good detangling with it as I do with Mason Pearson. I think it just takes me a little bit more work to brush through my hair when using this, but it gets the job done. And again, for being $30 compared to something like $2.75, I think that this is a really solid option. Moving on to the next price point tier, we have kind of like the $50 to $60 range. First is the Rock and Ruddle hairbrush, which retails for $56. So the issue I have with the Rock and Ruddle brush is honestly the size. Like, compared to Mason Pearson, you can see it's significantly smaller. I would just rather spend my money on something that is a bigger brush because I have so much hair, but if you don't, then this may be plenty big for you. The bristles have a really good amount of flexibility, and I feel like I get, you know, similar detangling and gentleness to the Mason Pearson brush with this, except for the tops of the bristles, because I also think that these definitely just feel a bit sharper than Mason Pearson. But again, like I mentioned earlier, the differences are really small. I'm just trying to be nitpicky and point out things that may be important to you. So while it's not my personal favorite, it's definitely a great brush, and I love the fact that you have a ton of different options for the paddle color. I got pink glitter. Next up is the Kent Classic Shine Mixed Bristle Hairbrush, which is $64.50. This one is still smaller than Mason Pearson, but bigger than Rock and Ruddle. And this one is also more widely spaced than Rock and Ruddle. Definitely more comparable to Mason Pearson in that sense. These bristles are very flexible. Unfortunately, these ones feel pretty pokey and sharp to me too. Not quite as much as Rock and Ruddle, but compared to Mason Pearson, I would say that's really the biggest difference. However, I still think it's an excellent brush. And if you're interested in a brush like this, you want one that is a bit higher quality, but you're like, I can't even think about spending over $70 on a brush, then this is one that you may really love and would be a great choice. The last three brushes that I have here, in addition to the fourth, which is Mason Pearson, are what I would consider to be the highest tier price point options, because they range from $85 to $100 or $275 if you're crazy in Mason Pearson. And the first of those is the Drybar Flatmate Boar Bristle Brush, which retails for $85. What I love about this brush is how large it is. It's the most comparable to Mason Pearson in size. And these bristles, compared to all of the high price point brushes, are the firmest, but not too firm. So I feel like I get the best detangling with this, but it's not too rough on my hair. I do think that this one is the pokiest of the four as well, but not as much for me as something like the Ion brush or Rock and Ruddle or Kent. I think it definitely feels gentler than that. The quality of the bristles here and everything about this brush is definitely there. It's held up really well. The bristles are not fraying at all. So if you're looking for the option that detangles the best, knowing that you'll lose a little bit of gentleness that you'll get with options that are not quite as is good at that, then I think Drybar is great. I really love this brush. Second to last is the Crown Affair The Brush number 001, which retails for $98. This brush is made of handcrafted beech wood, and I think that this is the most flexible of the high price point options, so the most gentle because of that. The trade-off for that is that the detangling is not quite as good as Drybar, so I think, you know, here's a good example of where the differences are really small. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. And the bristles are more widely spaced, which I think just makes this even more gentle. It is a little bit smaller than the Mason Pearson for sure, but nothing crazy. It's not feeling tiny. I would say this is just like a standard size brush, whereas this one is a large one. So this is another brush that I use all the time. I feel like I reach for this one most often when my hair is already dry and styled and I just need to brush through, like at the end of the night, or if I'm filming. You have probably seen me in a TikTok brushing my hair with this brush because I feel like it's a perfect option for that when I don't need a lot of detangling and I just want to be as gentle as possible. And the last potential Mason Pearson dupe is the Oribe flat resin brush, which I have talked about for a couple of years at this point. This retails for $100 and is the brush I was talking about that feels so much more luxe than Mason Pearson and like makes a little bit more sense why you're spending that kind of money. So this is allegedly a custom designed Italian resin, and like you can just tell such a difference in the material of these. It feels sturdier. Not that those things matter in how a brush is going to treat your hair, but if you're going to be spending a lot of money on a brush like this, you want it to feel like it's worth it. Out of all of the high price point brushes, and actually out of all of the brushes I have showed you guys that are potential dupes for Mason Pearson, this one has the most boar bristle coverage. So here is a side by side with Mason Pearson. I mean, it's a little bit tricky to tell because the base of this is black and this one's red, but I think you can still see even here that there's definitely more boar bristles, which means that this is going to be gentler. The bristles are perfectly flexible. I think if they were just a little bit longer, then that would be like perfect, because I definitely notice that I don't get quite as good of detangling with this one as I do with Mason Pearson or something like the Drybar brush. But again, this is something that I reach for all the time because of the fact that it's gentler. It is a brush that I love so much. It's held up so well over the past few years, like zero signs of this being old, except for the fact that I have fuzzies in it. Time to clean you. So out of these three more expensive options, I would say that Drybar offers the best detangling while being the least gentle of the three. It's still not like rough on the hair, but just to compare. Next would be Oribe. The detangling ability goes down a little bit, but the gentleness goes up. And then last would be Crown Affair, where it's like 2 steps down from Drybar in terms of detangling, but then a couple steps up in terms of how gentle it is. So if I'm being honest, I don't quite know how to wrap this video up and put a bow on it because I wish that there was like a clearer answer for me to give you where it's like, okay, this one is clearly the very best, or this one is clearly the very best, but that is just not the case. Hopefully the separation I made with the brushes at the beginning that were the least gentle, the roughest on my hair, was helpful in seeing kind of that separate, why I don't personally love those, and then, you know, the rest, how they compare to Mason Pearson, knowing that that is, again, like the brush, what everyone strives to be. Out of all of those Mason Pearson dupes, I think, again, what it really comes down to is just the amount of money that you want to or are able to spend, what you are looking for in terms of quality, or maybe some of the slight variations I called out as far as like how sharp they feel, or if they're a little bit gentler. Maybe that was what was like the deciding factor for you. And hopefully this just gives you some reassurance that you have a lot of different options for brushes that will be gentler on your hair, cause less damage, and cause less of your hair to break off. I know that if I don't tell you what my favorite brush is out of all 16 of these, people will be upset. But I feel like people are gonna be upset with my answer because unfortunately it is the Mason Pearson brush. I just feel like this gives me the perfect combination of everything that I've been talking about, the detangling, the gentleness, all of that. But again, that doesn't mean you need to run out and buy this because there are so many other options that are close enough to this that you just don't need to spend this kind of money if that's not something that you're down to do or able to do or whatever. I get it. Ryan has been begging me to give him one of these brushes for months now, and I've just been in the process of testing everything. I'm like, hold on, you need to wait because I need to do this video for all of my viewers first, and then you can have your pick of the brush you want. Well, he's obviously not taking my Mason Pearson or my Oribe. Now that I have all of these, I'm like, I don't want to give them up. So maybe I'll buy him one. I hope you found this helpful in just navigating all of these different brushes and now knowing that you can't really make a wrong choice when it comes to so many of these. I will list and link every single one of these brushes in the description box below in order of mention. So if you do want to pick something up after watching this video, those are all available to you there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What brushes are you using and loving or not loving? Are you going to test something else out after watching this video? If you would like to see more videos like this from me where I just tackle a category that you guys are interested in, review all of the top products in that category that you ask me to review, and then share my thoughts, let me know. I am happy to do that. These videos do take a ton of time and effort behind the scenes. So if you want to see more like this, please don't forget to support me and this channel by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, clicking on that notification bell, and sending my channel to a friend. Thank you for your support in doing those things. It really does mean a lot and just like helps this entire process. This was obviously a very expensive video. Thank you for watching my videos. I love the freaking heck out of you guys so much. Make sure to stay tuned for my next one because that will be up in a few days. But until then, I hope you have a great few days.